Awesome. Welcome, everyone. This is exactly Monday, November 10th, 2025. So excited to have Christina Sims, who is our Packback rep, joining us today to learn a little bit more about Packback, which is actually an instructional AI tool. We've talked a lot about generative AI in higher education. Really important to know that the landscape of AI is continuing to change and evolve, and Packback is specifically an instructional AI. And then there's a lot of other products out there, but super excited that we've been able to work with Packback for the last several years. I will share that I started using Packback around the time that we went into the COVID lockdown. And students, I think, really appreciated an opportunity to have immediate feedback, especially in online learning, when it came to like the writing. And again, that's all the AI algorithms that are kind of built into the tool. And what I have really found just amazing about the Packback team is they are always on top of all the higher trends of what's happening when it comes to AI in higher ed. So I think they're thought leaders in many ways in that way. And then they're always coming out with new tools and ways that we can continue to engage our students. And so I was sharing with some of our colleagues here that Packback is institutionally funded by our district office. And we hope to continue using or working with them for several years. And one of the advantages that we have of the Packback contract is that we have Christina and her team that are here to help us learn, grow, and continue to think about how we can include tools like Packback within our courses. I know when the last time Packback was here in our CTL was in February of 2024. And I know at that time there was some discussion of what are some additional ways besides courses that we can use Packback. They have worked with institutions in like student affairs to create more student engagement. They've done some capstone classes. They've got a breadth of ways that they've worked with institutions of higher ed. And so this is just an opportunity, maybe the start of many conversations with Christina and her team to learn a little bit more about Packback. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Christina.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that introduction and kind of front loading the information. That's really helpful. So it's lovely to be with you all today, although I will say I wish that I was in person, mostly because for the past 10 years, have lived in San Diego and just recently moved closer to my family in Kansas City, Kansas. And it is a whopping, according to my weather app, feels like 14 degrees right now. And let me tell you, after 10 years away, no. So
Got a
definitely
lot of buzz in the room, like 14 degrees. It's like 80 something here. So
miserable. It is the worst. Only upped by I went to a women's soccer match yesterday, which was wonderful to go to. However, once again, wind chill of 90 degrees. So we're learning on the spot, but hence I would much rather be in Arizona right now, but that's okay. But anyway, I'm really, really honored to be here with you all today. And when we started planning this session, it's an interesting balance, and I'm so glad that it's kind of a more intimate group, and I would love for this to be as interactive as you want it to be because Packback is a great resource that a lot of professors have found a lot of support in as the landscape, as was said, is always changing, especially right now with all of the conversations around AI. And so we could get super weedy into everything, but we could also keep it really casual. And oftentimes in these sessions, we have a variety of learners, just like in a classroom, who some people have used Packback before, some people have never even heard of it. So if you would oblige me, I'm going to basically try to cover it all. So in some ways, some of this might be a review for some of you, and for some people, this might be potentially even too much information, but I'm going to try to hit a decent balance. But again, with a smaller group, please, if there's a moment that you're like, you've lost me, I don't know what you're talking about, or hey, could we look at this again? Please go ahead and just stop this. This can be super conversational. And I am one member of a large team. And so my knowledge extends a certain amount of far. And then there's an awesome team behind me. So I already have a document going. If there's some questions that come up that I can't answer, I'll be very truthful with you all. And I'm going to try to balance all the screens and we'll get jumping into it. So the first thing, as per usual, is I'm going to see sometimes my second screen likes to do odd things in terms of its sizing. So if I go ahead and share this here, is this a normal size to you or is it not a normal size to you?
Normal. I think we all think it's normal,
Yes,
so we're
amazing.
good.
Sometimes it gets teensy tiny, so if that happens, just let me know. Packback, what is it? What are we doing today? Here's a quick look at the agenda. So we're going to start with some basics on what is Packback. And it sounds like you've already had several conversations around generative versus instructional AI, but I am going to go into that a little bit more and really where Packback stands in this constantly changing world of AI in academia. And then we're going to look at a few of the topics that were mentioned might be helpful. So I want to look at what is it in the classroom, and then also looking at Packback questions and our writing process, which kind of are our two areas of focus. And included in that, if you are a Packback user, hopefully I can share some information of things that have come down the pipeline or our newer releases, or where we might even be headed from here. Packback at a very high level is a platform for student writing and discussions. But ultimately, we really try to be a lot more than that. Um, we really try to focus on really elevating student voices, I would say, and also coming through and partnering with professors. I did not come from a collegiate world, but I do come from an education background too. So I know how many things it is to juggle, especially with a bunch of programs and a bunch of people coming in and saying, like, we can help with this, we can help with this. But um, my experience with Packback truly is a lot of people who come from an educational background and really want to help lift the things that we can so that professors can focus in on content and ideas. So really what we're doing with Packback is trying to provide real-time feedback for students and support them with our use of instructional AI so that their ideas, their voice can not only grow throughout their time in the course, but can also find a way to express those things. The Packback platform kind of boils down to sort of two columns, I would like to say. So we have Packback discussions, and we also have Packback writing and originality, which is more of our long form. We will today go in and look a little bit at both of those. And I know it was sent out in an email earlier. Hopefully, some of you were able to create an account. But if not, I'm also going to stop here in a few slides. I don't know how many it is, and give us a time that if you haven't been able to create that, I personally think that that's a massive part of being able to click around and see what in the heck I'm talking about. Also noted here is that we do sync with Canvas, so we can already send your grades over. It can link right into your course. We try to make that as seamless as possible too. So looking at AI in the classroom and what is generative AI, what is instructional AI, how do we view it, so on and so forth. Really, we see instructional AI as leveraging forms of artificial intelligence so that we can enhance the instruction of students. And then we're looking at generative AI as what is literally in the name, generating new content. And that is something that just, I will say it so many times because, again, you can't hear it enough. That's something that Packback doesn't do, does not want to do, cannot do. The platform just can't generate information for students. So if this is a conversation that is newer to you, and if it's something that you are old hat at, please feel free to jump into because I have the information that I have, and you might have some additional things to add too. But if we're looking at generative AI a little bit closer, we know that it is creating new and original content along the way for students. That might be text. That's, I think, a lot of times what we're seeing the most right now within schools, but it could also be images, video, so on and so forth. A few of the types of generative AI that exist include this list here. So some fun ways that AI can be incorporated into the classroom or daily life because the fact of the matter is that it is here. It is something that is going to continue to be molded and integrated, and we're going to have a lot of trials and errors along the way. But there are definitely, if you're a person who plays around with generative AI, there are definitely some things that it can be really helpful for. And then, at least for me, there are certain things that I'm like, don't use a robot for that. Go make sure you know how to do things yourself. But some examples might be checking assignments, might be brainstorming vacation outfits, planning meals, finding new music or shows. Now, this first bullet point, though, is where we start getting into some of kind of the gray area and going, well, what if I'm completely wrong? Is it rewriting for me? Am I learning through that? Is it something that I'm able to process? Or is it something that is just going to spit out new content for me? So, in discussions, here are some of the negative impacts, excuse me, that generative AI can have on traditional discussion platforms. Students are usually, a lot of students, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of students often struggle, especially in some of the intro courses, to find what they're trying to say or how to use their voice. And if they're just using a generative AI platform and it's writing for them, well, they're not finding any other way to express that for themselves. They're just relying on the machine to do it for them. Additionally, we see that leading to lack of critical thinking skills and, of course, academic dishonesty. And I think that a lot of professors from my conversations are running into this frequently of going, well, is it generated by AI? Is it something that the student did? How do we know? As a society, we went through the whole thing already of like M dashes, that line this way, that there was a point in time that it was being said, okay, if you use that or if you see that, it's probably generated by AI. But some people, guilty, use an M dash often in writing, whether it be an email or otherwise. And also, the AI is constantly learning and taking in that new information and learning to not do that thing. So there's definitely this crossroads that I feel like everyone's experiencing. And it's a conversation that is constantly happening within Packback of, all right, what does that mean for the product that we have? What does that mean for the way that we can support educators? What does that mean for the way that we can support students? And where do we find that balance of utilizing it to support, but not using it as a crutch? So, Packback has decided that here are a few of the ways that we really want to leverage that instructional AI as a support. I'll just let you read through those briefly. So, then looking at instructional AI comparatively to generative, again, I know some of this is a repeat, but if it's a new world, I want to just make sure that we're being very clear about who Packback is and what we do. But we know that students are going to need skills of literacy, of discussion to make it in the real world and to continue the world functioning in a way that can be communicative. So, how can we use AI ethically in a way to support them is where our instructional AI is coming into play. So, rather than generating for students, we're really looking to coach students through feedback, not just by giving them answers. We also want to help faculty be able to scale your teaching, not replace it. This is another thing I will say over and over again. Packback cannot, does not, will not do content. We really want that to stay with educators. So, again, we're not going to beat around the bush as it is. There's a lot of conversation around, well, is AI coming for educators' job? Is it going to be a full replacement, et cetera, et cetera? Whereas I can't speak to all of that, I can tell you Packback, not the case at all. We want educators, we believe in educators, we support educators to have just more capability and time to focus in on what they're passionate about or what they're assigned to, either way. So we also want to look at pedagogical best practices, not get interrupting those, and I'll explain sort of the ones that Packback is built on here momentarily, and then continuing to use ethical AI. This is a brief snapshot of some of our instructional AI on the platform, but you don't need to worry about looking at this too much. We're going to get in there and look over it. But to break it down a little bit further, some of the ways that Packback has instructional AI supports built in, we have 5 categories of writing feedback that we'll get into again when you can play around with it too. We do have a chatbot that I would also encourage you to play around with because you'll see pretty quickly that you can't say, write me a paragraph about elephants, and it's just going to do it for you. It's rather going to lead students and prompt them in their writing. We also have what we call our AI risk, which is kind of traditional plagiarism, and then originality. Um, and then our discussions moderation too goes through a whole cycle when students submit, and we'll get into that a little bit more as well. Just because you probably haven't had enough charts or comparisons here, I'll just leave this up for a moment to, because I personally liked it, to be able to see a little bit more of what would each of these features look like from a generative AI standpoint, or what would it look like from what Packback is trying to do. So I'll leave that up for just a moment before we really jump into getting you set up to click around in Packback.
So Christina, one question that came up in the room
Yeah.
was so right now, just even based on this chart, it sounds like a lot of it is to coach and help educators, right, with writing or help educators support students in their writing. One question was from like a student affairs side of things, is there a way for like a student affairs representative to be more efficient in their job with students as a result of Packback?
Ooh, interesting question. I think that I would have a lot of follow-up questions from that on perhaps what areas of the job. The first thing that comes to mind for me, and if again, I know it's different at every college, so I'm not sure if this would fall into the right category. But what came to mind is a lot of first year courses or intro to the college, or welcome to here. We want you to get to know people. That's something that I've seen a variety of institutions use Packback for, um, putting it into groups. And then also, I think that it can be really utilized for, we'll do something called Writing Lab here momentarily. That is going to be a great resource for students to be able to receive feedback regardless of what course they're in. But I'm not sure if that particularly would address what the student affairs office is trying to do. So my answer is possibly. And Liz, if you have insights too of things that you've used Packback for that you think it might be beneficial for, or anyone else, please feel free to jump in too.
Yeah, I think some of it was just, again, the landscape of AI is so broad that I think they were thinking about like, do you all have through Packback an ability to establish like a bot of some sort to help students maybe as they're like navigating the beginnings of starting at the college in certain ways? And I don't believe so, but I also know you all are constantly creating new products and experiences. And so I said I would ask the person had to leave, but I
Oh,
said I would
sure.
ask to get a sense, and maybe we can always do a follow-up to see if there's more information we can get from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would agree with you. Right now, it doesn't have anything that where it's building that type of bot to lead those. But again, what comes to mind is a course that I actually helped build earlier this year for a different college where it was a really it was through kind of their first year experience course, and we really modeled it along the way. So the students had some discussions, but they also had some almost quizzes or polls that they were going through of here's your handbook, you've gone through this, how do you answer this? So again, may not be exact, but it is something that has been really helpful towards them, and we're always down for a discussion, and at the very least willing to write down the question and submit it as something that could be beneficial as Packback continues to evolve too.
Thanks, Christina. So it sounds like you
Absolutely.
all could work with like divisions or specific areas of a college to use Packback as a way of maybe helping students navigate different aspects of student experience within that division or within that particular area of the college.
Absolutely. And this is going to come up a little bit later, but it feels like an appropriate time to share it now as well. We have a very easy way of copying over communities too. So if it's something that a whole division decides, well, we want to do this, but we want to build it in chunks, or this person wants to take this part and I'm going to take this part, but we would like to keep it pretty consistent. We have the capabilities to do that too and make it as easy as possible to share the knowledge and the workload as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And while we're paused, any other questions up until this point?
See a lot of,
Not yet.
we're ready to go to the
All
next
right.
part. Yeah.
Let's keep rolling. This is just a little bit more of the same, so I'm not going to stay on it for terribly long, but here are a few of the things that we bring to the table. And then I'm just going to go ahead and go to the next slide, which shows how to add Packback to Canvas. So let's have this for a moment. I would love some help from the other side to let me know when and if everyone either is logged on or doesn't want to log on or has it set up. And then I'll be able to go on to the next part after that.
I think we've got people logging in and
Perfect. And no rush. We've got plenty of time to go over everything. And I will say if you're creating a new community, there is a little button, sure, that you can toggle at the bottom that says create it as a sandbox account that you can always play around in. You can build as many communities as you want to. Along the way, you can try out different things. So just know that that is available as well.
one question did come up as we're kind of chatting in the room. Could you tell us a little bit more, like when it comes to the discussion, community, like the discussion boards, is there an AI checker already in those discussion boards?
There is. That's something that I'll be able to show you a little bit more too. But kind of as you're setting up your communities or getting logged in, I'll just go ahead and explain a little bit about our moderation process. So when students, specifically on discussions in this instance, when students submit their question, it's going to go through essentially an AI checker and it's going to look for things like, is it a closed-ended question? Is there profanity? Is there plagiarism? And if it flags something, it's going to send it to a human moderator on our team, and the human moderator will look into a little bit more. If it just seems like something that kind of glitched, they'll go ahead and submit it for the student. No harm, no foul. Not a problem. If it is something, though, that stands out, it's then going to have the human moderator reach out to the student both on the platform and with through email, and it's going to coach them on what is basically blocking their submission for getting posted. And then it's going to submit that for them with the original timestamp. Now, in terms of things like AI, generative AI usage, it can and will flag that and is something that, again, we're always having people on our engineering team work at updating that. But Packback does really pride ourselves in having a very low false positive rate. So what it's going to do is it's going to say a low, medium, or high category, basically, of likeliness that it was generated by AI. And then we give that to the professors to have a conversation with the students from there. But it is checking it against our internal platform and external platforms and is going to flag it ideally out of low, medium, high. Not perfect, but we have, I believe, a 0.03 false positive rate. So that's something. And honestly, this year, if you're a Packback user, it was something that we set the threshold to be a little bit more stringent than it was before. And we got feedback from people that they did not like that version of it. So it was something that our engineers continued editing and we brought it back down. And so it is something that we take feedback from people very seriously and are constantly putting that into play too. Any other questions that come up, they can be about things we've talked about or otherwise. I'm happy to see what we can answer as we're getting everyone logged in.
Maybe we're not. I mean, Christine, can you hear us? Oh, sorry. Liz stepped out for a minute. We couldn't tell if we were on mute or not to tell you that we are good if you want to keep on going while we
Beautiful.
Okay.
Let's keep rolling. Sounds good. I heard muffled sound, so I kind of thought everyone was just talking amongst themselves, which is great. Let's keep it rolling. Okay, so activating curiosity with Packback questions. So what we're going to look at here is I'm going to jump into the platform too and kind of walk you through what you might set up or what students might see too, because that's probably a version that you won't be able to see as much here. But really the main difference with Packback discussions versus say like discussions on Canvas is that we have students being the ones asking the questions, which for one is really helpful when we're trying to not get the same answer from everyone. Same thing when it comes to responses. By having students be the ones lead their own learning in that way, we just start seeing a lot more variety in what students are publishing. So let me jump into a community here. And is my screen still a normal size or no?
It's great.
Oh, yay. What a wonderful thing. I had a session last Friday, and let me tell you, every technology thing that could have possibly gone wrong did. So I'm thrilled that this is working well for us today. So you might be in a similar view to this. Just so you kind of know where I'm coming from here, I'm using a previous community, which is just the word that we use for the course that has been built in Packback. And so we're going to see some things from students and from the professor that have already passed. Everything in mine is going to say a curious mind just because, you know, of having anonymous writers in there, but you would see your actual students' names, normal things. So the first thing you're going to see, and I will say that the interface is extremely similar between students and faculty. The main difference is going to be that you just have more features to play with. So if we're looking at discussions and writing, and polls is kind of its own thing, but if you want to click into where it says discussions first, again, it's probably going to look a little bit different than mine. But what I want to show you here is how we would set this up. So you can just go into manage assignments. And for you, what we would do is we would click add assignment, or it might be prompting you to do it from the get-go. But what you'll see is that you can name the assignments, of course, anything that you want them to be. Some people do go with just like week 1, week 2. Some people give it a little bit more. And then often similar to what I would call a standard discussion board, people want to do a weekly cadence or a biweekly cadence. But we can also edit it so that students need to submit their question a couple days before everything is due, which I tend to recommend. Otherwise, you know, we get to Saturday night and your go-getter students are worried because nobody's posted anything and they can't respond. But you can choose if students are going to, usually we follow like an ask 1 question, respond to 2, but you can set it up however you want. So when we get in there, I'm going to go ahead and go to a closed assignment, which is something that you won't have unless you already have a course, just to show you how it works. So feel free to continue clicking around or to watch how this goes down. Let's say I'm going to do discussion post 3. So what you would do as the professor is you would set up your what we call a guidepost here. Some people, again, this is very much a choice that anyone can make. Some people do the most minimal instructions, such as write your question about what we discussed this week, the end. Some people like to give more information, and some people even put in links that they want students to consider, or options such as please read this and watch this and do this, and then ask your question in one of these 3 categories. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be set up. If this is something you end up wanting to use, I have a bunch of guidepost examples that I can easily send. And also, I really enjoy working with professors too to go, okay, here's what we're trying to do. And this is how I would maybe set it up in your Packback. And we can kind of play with it from there. But that's what the students are going to see for the instruction. Then when they go in to ask a new question, here's where we start seeing the feedback that students are going to get along the way. So if you went ahead and clicked that red button, you'll probably see the exact same screen as I do. And I'll give you a couple options here. One, you can absolutely play around with asking a question and starting to write about it. Or if you want to skip that part, you can just click where it says add demo text, and we'll still be able to see the type of feedback that students are going to get. So I'll give everyone a second to start looking around at that, and then I'll explain a little bit more about what we are seeing here. First, I'll identify that students can add a source, which is a really helpful thing. And then when we start looking over at the feedback, take note of this little area that says curiosity score. We'll come to it in a moment. But what you're going to see is that in real time, students are able to get feedback in these 4 different categories. You're going to see that students are going to receive positive reinforcement, but they're also going to get a notification if it's something that they need to work on. So example, this one, if I was typing this in and saw that my question appears to be closed-ended. Well, darn it, I don't even know what that means. Oh, look, a nice link that I can click, and it's going to tell me more here. So really what we're trying to do at Packback is not only guide students, but also give them more information so it's something that they can learn from and not have that same repetitive mistake or hiccup along the way. Another thing is that it's going to show in text where it's talking about the item that it's identifying. Example here, the grammar faults. Okay, we're seeing that this is an issue. We're seeing that this is a spelling issue. And then students are needing to opt in to change that. So we're never going to just correct for them, which is, in our view, another portion of not being generative. We want to show students where it is, but lead them to making their own choices if they want to change it or not. So this is what the feedback is going to look like for students. And again, in a minute, or right now, I don't know what you're doing. You can absolutely click around and see some of these differences here. You can absolutely play around with the chatbot too, but let's talk curiosity score for a second. So really these 4 categories, curiosity, credibility, communication, and convention, those are all going to be joined together to give the students what we call a curiosity score. And it's going to tell them before they even submit, here's the range where your curiosity score comes in. Now, I like to explain it as it's essentially an effort metric. It's positive academic behaviors that we want students to utilize. And the reason that we're not giving them a specific score is because you as the professor get to set what the minimum curiosity score for students is. So let's say that you set it as a 70, and I see if we did exact curiosity scores, and let's say I got a 71, but I wasn't really done with my thought, I was just trying to hit the number, I could just be done. But we are trying, even in small ways, to prompt students to really take ownership of their learning and develop it as best as possible. So again, you can set the curiosity score anything you want. Some people go with a 30, some people go higher into the 80s, so on and so forth. But the point is for students to reach that positive academic number based on these 4 categories. I'll show you what that looks like in terms of grading here just in a moment. But I do want to give you a second to kind of click around with this, go to the chat, start having a little conversation there. You can also look at this sources button, so on and so forth. So I'll give us just a minute here before we look at what it looks like for student submission and in terms of what you would see as a professor there. But along the way, as you're clicking around, if other questions have or do come up, feel free to call them out too. Although I do think at this point it is all muted, so if you do have one, you might have to unmute something.
Yes. We,
Aha.
we're also just helping troubleshoot. It seems like, some people weren't able to fully get in yet, and so that's part
Oh, I
of
hope I
it.
didn't jinx it by talking about last week's tech issues.
Yes, it's an evolving opportunity and challenge for us, tech.
And I will say something else that is unique about what I've experienced with Maricopa so far is that you all have like 5 different emails or something, and sometimes it depends which email you're trying to use. So you may be running into an issue with emails, in which case I would try to build from Canvas or make sure that you're logging in using your Canvas email, if that makes sense. It doesn't fully make sense to me. I just know that that's a thing.
I think you helped me out earlier this year. I've never had that experience, and something happened this particular year that we had
Yeah.
to do the email stuff.
I had to learn on the spot. I built out a bunch of courses, and then so many people were having some issues with it, and that's when I learned and ended up having to do a bunch of which woohoo.
So it looks like we've got some people maybe working together on potentially the prompt.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, let's just take a little bit of time here to play around with it, because again, we've got some time to continue going over other portions of it. And I personally just think it's most helpful to get to see it in real time and see what questions do come up as it's being utilized.
So I will share that maybe as we're kind of talking through one thing that I have found in using Packback, that when I'm creating discussion boards on content over grammar, because sometimes when you're in the discussion board, you're spending so much time like, you need to capitalize the I, don't forget punctuation, like a lot of that I feel that because of the instant feedback that students get, I have less of that focus and more on the focus of the content and the students' intrinsic sort of motivation to learn more from each other. Going back to something that I had mentioned that one of the sort of learning curves in the classes I've been teaching are students are so used to using the discussion board in Canvas, and to kind of get them to use Packback a little bit can be sometimes like, I've never used this, oh my gosh, like, and then at the end of the semester, it's always one of their favorite things. I think because I actually have heard students say, I feel like this has made me a more critical thinker. I feel like I ask better questions because I'm more focused now on open-ended versus just closed-ended questions. So I do find that there is, growth in students, not just in terms of that intrinsic curiosity that they have, also just maybe in modeling, right? How to ask questions, how to write responses. I think that that's been one big value that I have found that I don't think when I first was using Packback, I thought that wasn't like something, an immediate result or outcome that I thought I was going to get. But I do see there being a lot of value in that. Any questions from anyone as you're getting into community or maybe playing around? Also, one thing that Packback does allow you to do is you can create groups. So you can create discussion groups. So if you all were going to be working on, maybe you're doing some peer review work towards an assignment, or you want students to work within particular groups that are, maybe they're focusing on a specific module or a specific topic, like that is another thing that Packback platform allows you to do.
I created a prompt. So now, as a student, where would I access it and respond to it?
So the question, Christina, was, as an instructor, I created the prompt. Now, where do students go to access it and respond to it?
Sure, absolutely. So if I go back here a moment, if you go into either on the sidebar, or at the top where it says discussion assignments, you'll be able to see where you built that either in open assignments or closed assignments, depending where you put the date. So if the date is either past or future, it'll be in closed assignments, or if not, it'll be under open. And you should be able to click just right into it and then go to ask a new question. Now, in terms of students, if this was actually the course that they were in, we would have it linked to your Canvas. And so they would just click the Packback button and it would bring them directly to this page right here. And then they could go into discussion assignments. Same thing, if it's an open assignment, they'll just see it right away. Did that answer that for you?
I think we are still working towards just understanding.
So can I show maybe mine?
Yeah.
So for instance, my post instructions for my humanities classes, they would find a piece of artwork related to the period.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Back
sorry.
up,
Yep.
back up.
Okay.
Where do they get a notification to do this?
I have it set up on Canvas as an assignment. So I'll show you. So in Canvas, I didn't happen that week. Discussion forum module 7. So I set it up and they click on it, and it'll have my prompt as well. And then it prompts them to load it in a new window for themselves. So when they click on that, it takes them to Packback discussion. So it takes them to their version. They have it just like we do as a student. And then you can see, oh, that's my module, or that's my discussion. Okay. So instead of clicking on it where it takes them to discussion,
Okay.
it's to Packback.
Okay.
It is definitely a mental shift for them. And I had to like kind of do it gradually, like where this week it doesn't count for points. Just make sure you're going to the right spot.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then they click on it.
So
I can hear some of what's going on. I know you're getting help there, but there's a couple things that I just want to sort of acknowledge that are also kind of coming down the pipeline. One, we just had a meeting, I think it was last week, where it talked about the number of clicks that it's taking to get certain places. So that's something that's already also being worked on. And yes, some of it is a shift, but it is something that we're aware of too, and are continually working with Canvas and with other LMSs to hopefully pare down a little bit. And also, we do have deep linking available, but Maricopa has not opted into it yet. We heard spring, but I have not heard an update on that yet. But that also hopefully will help down the pipeline too, but doesn't really address the issues right now.
I found after the first week or two that they were trained and they understood. It was more that they were used to how it opened up for Canvas.
Sure.
That was the confusing part for them.
So if I'm setting up an assignment,
Mhm.
okay, so, okay, I created.
So you create it, and you do have to create it in, this is where I always get confused and I always end up creating more work for myself. You do have to create the assignment first in Packback.
Okay, so I created, so here's my
Yeah.
prompt.
Yep, and then there's a step, Christina, this is, this is only my second semester, both semesters I've done it wrong. So, so you have to create the assignment first in Packback, right? And then you sync it and it populates in Canvas?
Yes, it's definitely easier to build in Packback first.
So if you had it.
So like, for example, this is my discussion prompt.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not in Canvas yet.
Okay, so I have to create an
So,
assignment.
No. Yes, sorry. This is where I'm gonna stop talking because this is where I always mess it up. And I end up creating more work for myself and doing it twice. So can you explain how you sync it and add it to Canvas?
I can pull back up that slide, which is the best version that I have of that. Let's see here.
And then another question that's come up in the in-person location is what curiosity score points? I know 40 is what I typically do because I have usually like introduction courses. But help us understand how you assess, like what would be an appropriate curiosity score for a question or a peer response based on the level of course that you're teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that most intro courses tend to go, I would say usually around 50 or so, and then kind of just iterates up from there. Um, Really 70 I've found is a really sweet spot where it's not asking too much of students, but it is asking them to put forth some effort in it. But again, a lot of first year courses, 101s, et cetera, go more in that sort of 50 range. And it's something I will say too that can also be edited throughout the semester. So if you also start somewhere and you're like, ooh, this is either too high or not high enough, you can go in and edit that too. And another thing to speak to Canvas, I don't talk super much about Canvas because that is not my area of expertise, but we have a wonderful, wonderful support team that is their area of expertise. So if it's building out your course the first time or trying to remember how do you make this less hard on yourself, you can always send me an email and I can connect you with those people. But that's why I'm also not speaking too much to the Canvas part of it because I don't need to lead you further astray either.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
It's like
Curiosity stuff. Oh, just like overall.
As some of that is still being worked on, feel free. I'm just going to show a little bit more back on the version that you would see as a professor and a few other things that I think are super helpful. But again, I don't want to throw too many features at you, but just so you have a little bit of an idea of what is possible. So this is back in that discussion forum that we were looking at before. And so what you'll see here is that once students have submitted, you and they, but individually, not for the whole class, are able to see what that curiosity score is. And again, I really like to explain it as an effort metric because a lot of times I'll get questions about like, well, what if they didn't address this part of the content? If that's what you're looking for, my advice is to always put in a little caveat that Packback is going to give you an effort or give you a curiosity score. And then I, as the professor, am going to look over it for content and add or take away my own points. Um, because again, Packback just is not built to be able to do content. But you can see here that this particular professor had set it up so that students see that they're going to ask one question, answer two, and they needed to get a 50 curiosity score on both their initial post and their responses. So how the grading side of this works specifically with discussions is that if they do all of these three things, if they meet their requirements, so one question, two responses, if they hit that minimum curiosity score threshold, and if they submit it on time, they get the full points. And you can set it up as points percentage. We can get into all of that later, but that's how that works. And again, you can edit it, but a lot of people use it more for, are they doing this discussion? This is kind of an additional part of their course grade. A few things that I think are really helpful of ways that you can interact, especially if you have a large course. One, you can spark the post. Students can also spark each other's posts. It's basically the equivalent of a social media like or heart or something like that. But then there's also a way that you can go in and give feedback to students directly. If you praise students, it's going to be public. All other students are going to be able to see what it was that you loved so much about that post. And if you coach the student, it's always going to be private just between you and them. And that's in addition to the moderation panel that we talked about earlier. That's already happening. And then one thing that I find super helpful is that you can go in and this place on the side called Match and Message. This is a great tool that is available to you to use both on the discussions and the writing side of it. If you want to, oh, how would I explain that? Basically, just not sit with your grade book and have to double check who you've messaged, who you haven't had an interaction with yet. But instead, you can go to Match and Message. And let's say that I was going to look at discussions. And let's say that I wanted to address any student who is not submitted for that week. So I could click Student Insights and I could go, all right, I want to look at any students who haven't participated for this week. And there's a lot of different categories, of course, that you can choose. And then it's going to pull up, these would be actual student names, of course, any students who this applies to. And you can very easily go to continue to message, and you can write a general email. You can also include a variable that has just their first name. It's only going to go to that student into their email inbox and into their Packback notifications on the platform. And it's going to feel like a very personal touch. You can say, hey, didn't hear from you this week. Would really love to know your thoughts on XYZ. And that's just another great way to kind of continue that communication with students without having to spend so much time notating who or who has not participated. So that's one of my favorite features there. Um, I'm going to go ahead and give you another moment to look over anything that you want on discussions. And if I can show you anything else, please let me know. And then we'll also make sure we get to the writing side because I want to make sure that there's some time for additional questions at the end too.
Christina, could you talk a little bit about the leaderboard and who's
Sure.
able to see it? I know that some of my students have had questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go under discussion assignments, and if we go to the leaderboard, you're able to see how many curiosity points the leaders have. And so some people like to use it as kind of a gamification of the platform. You're able to see how many points and how many sparks. And then, you know what? Off the top of my head, if you utilize Packback, you may have to answer this for me. I don't think that students are able to see the questions asked and responded. I think that they see curiosity and spark only. Is
I
that
believe they only see the curiosity and the sparks.
okay?
What happens is I've had students be like, how do I get to number one? Like, what are we gonna do? Because those are the gamified students that really get excited when they see their name like at the top. And I always tell them, right, this is just a fun way, though at the end of the day, I care more about what you're learning. But maybe just because curiosity score points have come up a few times just in today, how do those curiosity score points get generated? I know that there's an AI algorithm that creates them.
Yeah, that's honestly the bottom line of it is that there's an algorithm that uses those 4 categories that we looked at to generate what the score is. And students can go in and let's see here. If I go in here, I think that it's connected here. And if not, I know a second location that it is where I believe that it can. Ooh, that's fun. Let's try that again. Okay, there it is. If we go to what does my curiosity score mean, this is what students can also click on. Now, we talked about setting these a little bit higher between you and I as the adults in the room here, but this is an explanation that students can have too that shows what those points are.
I think also it really goes back to, I really use the Packback platform more for like community building and just giving students a way to engage with each other outside of just me, especially in an online class. So like I would say if for you, that kind of critical thinking piece is foundational to your curriculum and what you're trying students to accomplish as a result of using. Maybe like that advanced post is more appropriate just because of what you're trying to activate within the class as a result of the tool. Whereas, like I said, mine is more student engagement, community building, and like let's build community week to week and more like, I always like in my little instructional video to them, it's always like, imagine the Packback platform as if we were in class and before we start talking about the course content, you are talking to each other and saying, hey, what did you think about, talking about emotional intelligence? How do you see that relating to, the field that you want to work in? Like those types of conversations is kind of why I like to use it. Anyway, just kind of what
Absolutely. And as we've talked about generative AI and that really coming into play in a lot of assignments, I think that discussions are a great way to have students infuse their own experience and to ask them to talk about things that are going to kind of force them to diving into their own knowledge or background or experiences in order to have those conversations, not only initially, but also in response to others. Which I think does a great job sort of combating utilizing generative AI for everything.
Right.
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to get us over into writing because, again, I know there's a lot to go over, but it is not an empty situation that I'm happy to meet with anyone one-on-one or another small group or anything like that too. That's a big part of the job. So happy to help as you find more things to ask about or that you want to set up. But for this moment, I just want to make sure that we get through all of the topics here. So what I'm going to do, a couple different options if it's something that you want to follow along with, is I can either click that home button again, or I can go straight to writing assignments. I'm going to go ahead and click the home button just so that we sort of get in that process of what students would see. So if I go into writing assignments, we are going to try to keep this pretty high overview, but definitely want to show you all how this might be of help within a course. So I want to make sure that we are looking at what it would look like to set up, what it would look like for students to submit, and all of the benefits that they get from writing within Packback. And then also as an educator, what supports we have in the grading process and afterward too. So very similar to discussions, you're going to see everything out of open or closed assignments. But let's just say that I was setting this up for the first time. Very similar to discussions, we're going to click Manage Assignments, and then I'm going to go to Add Assignment. And here you'll see that there are two different options to choose first. First of all, we're going to start with deep dives, but I will come back to originality review so that you know what that is as well. Now, in our case, we would start a new document. Something that I do want to highlight though is this is very new to Packback, something that people have been asking for a long time, and we just released a couple weeks ago, less than a month ago. But we now have what we call a follow-up assignment. So, for example, I've been working with a professor who's working with a lower level of introductory writing. And so what she's done is really scaffolded, a word. Anyway, she has used scaffolding to build this assignment. And so we have the students first are doing an introductory paragraph, and they're getting points for completing that. And then we built the next one as a follow-up assignment. So she was able to give feedback on that initial piece of writing. And then the second assignment, that's the first body paragraph, it already copies over what students had written before. It also includes the feedback that they had been given, and so they can see the continuation of that. And then we are doing that back and forth until they have a full completed paper. So that's something that people have really been asking for and are really excited about, and so far has been super great. But again, let's say we're starting off, new document. I'm going to go to create new prompt, and then here's some very basic things that one would fill out. This is also a great place that if, say, you already have a writing assignment in your course, you can send it to me and go, hey, I would really like to try this on Packback and I'm not sure how to do it. I'll give it a stab first and foremost, and then you can go from there. Okay, I like this, I don't like this, let's edit it. But sometimes that initial jump is the scariest part. So I am happy to take that on first so that you can just edit something instead of try to build it from the ground up if that's one of your least favorite things. So here we would put in the prompt, you can put in the description. And then one of the cool things too is you have an option of adding guiding questions. Guiding questions are just simply things that you want to make sure students address within their writing. And then you can also put a resource if desired. And then nice, you can save the prompt too so that semester over semester, you're not having to rebuild it. Or if you really liked how you set something up in one course, you can put it in another one and edit it from there. But that's how you would set up the prompt. Now, the rubric is where we get into some more of the customization side of things. So, first, I want to point out these first 5 categories under requirements and identify the fact that you are absolutely able to change how many points they are. You can also not include any of them if you want. But these first 5 that you're seeing are what we call our AI supported categories. Once we get into the student writing, you'll see a little bit more of this in play. But this is basically the red pen of the whole thing for you. So some of those really tedious moments of grading, I was sharing with some people the other day, I used to have a certain report that the students all did right before Thanksgiving break. And this was when I was just starting teaching. And I just thought it was a great idea to make it due right before Thanksgiving. And then my whole Thanksgiving break would just be grading. So this could have saved me a lot of time on that. But Packback is going to give suggestions to students while they're writing in real time, but then it's also going to offer a score that, again, you can always go back in and override to if you disagree. But these are the categories that our AI is able to support. And then when you go down further, we have this instructor graded rubric criteria. That again, you could choose not to have any of that. Or you could put as many criteria as you want. I've heard there's no limit. I don't know for certain, but that is what the rumor is. And then you can also set however many performance levels you want for it to get to your total points that you desire. So again, something that if people have a rubric built out already, you can send it our way. We can do our best to put it into the platform and kind of see what that ends up looking like. So once your rubric is built, once your assignment prompt is set, then you would just go ahead and save the assignment. And for our purposes here, we're going to jump into a previous assignment that was built in this community so I can show you what sorts of feedback students are going to get along the way. Let's pick this first one. So once again, there will be a red button where students can start, but this has been here before, so I'm going to click this draft. As you are playing around, you can also choose the demo text too. And I'm going to give this just a moment. I know I'm talking a lot and probably fairly quickly, so let's give it a breather before I jump in and start showing you around from the student perspective.
Any questions? Let's keep going, Christina.
Perfect. So you'll see that the feedback is going to look somewhat similar to what we saw in discussion. So hopefully that's pretty familiar for students as well. But here you'll notice that the feedback is going to happen in each of these categories that we said were the AI supported categories. There's also moments anytime you see the glasses, it's going to highlight in text where it's talking about those things too. And then it's going to give corrections, suggested corrections too. So I think grammar and mechanics is usually the best place to spot that. Here's the grammatical and mechanical errors. But again, students are actually going to have to fix it. They cannot just say, I think there used to be a thing on spell check where you could just click fix all of them when I was writing papers. Not an option here. You actually have to opt into choosing that. But you'll see, and feel free to click through there, that it's going to have all of those 5 categories. But again, it's not touching content or any of the instructor criteria. Similar to discussions, you also have the ability to chat with the AI assistant here, and it's giving some different prompts along the way. But absolutely give this a minute to scroll through. If you want to see all of your alerts at once, that's just under that instant feedback too. And then again, it does link right to the chatbot there as well. If students include sources, you're going to see that in this 3rd tab. And over here, if we move a little bit to the left, if you click works cited, that's where students can add a source. Now, the works cited, you can choose if you're going to be working in APA or MLA or Chicago. Another thing that we get asked often is it going to correct in text citations? No. Or formatting in terms of those different formats that you want. Not yet being worked on though. And then you can see, students can see their history as well, especially once we start going into if professors submit feedback and then we do a back and forth on that of revisions, students will be able to see that under history too. Any questions on this part so far?
Doesn't appear to be any of that.
Okay, great. So I'm going to exit out of this again, sort of just for time here, but it's certainly something that I would encourage you to play around with. Here, just to give another view of what students would see, they would of course see the prompt that you've given. They'd see a glance at whatever sort of details you've included for the rubric. But if they want to see more specifics on the breakdown of the categories, they can go straight into where the full rubric is here. And then you would have the submissions button. So once we get into the submissions, once it decides that it feels like loading, it's feeling kind of the end of the day. There we go. So here's where we started talking a little bit earlier about our AI risk and about uniqueness. So these are two columns that you'll see when students submit their paper, and they have access to see that too. But you'll see a uniqueness percentage, which is kind of the traditional plagiarism. Is it copied from elsewhere? And then they're also going to receive a low, medium, or high version of AI risk and the likelihood that it was generated by AI. And that's where we turn it over to the professors to evaluate that more specifically. But you'll also be able to see the student's grade, and this, as we can tell, is already synced. But you would go in and add in your scores for the instructor criteria, and then we can sync it over to your grade book. But you're able to see everything all at once here, and that is a very brief overview of the deep dives writing part. So now if I went back to where we were earlier of the writing assignments, I said we were going to come back and look at originality review. And this I want to show you extremely briefly. It's very, very similar to deep dives, except you don't have as much setup. So in originality review, you would put in the assignment name. You can also choose from a variety of different types of writing. You can put in a description or a prompt here, and then you just choose how many points you want it to be. Now, you'll notice here that the originality fingerprint, so being able to see the AI risk and see the percentage, is something that can be toggled on or off just depending what works best for you. So once that's set up, students would take a piece of writing that they've done, whether it's a PDF form or whether it's from a doc, and they would upload it and they would get very similar feedback as it was in the AI supported categories. They just don't have all of the other rubric criteria that you had built out on the deep dives part of it. So if I jump back into our slide deck here, something that I wanted to pull up, and I am going to skip a few slides here, but I will gladly share this deck with you too. But something that I wanted to talk about here on our writing too is we really work to promote some equitable features too, so that this can most benefit the most amount of people as possible. So some things to know here that do exist on the Packback platform. One, students can receive the feedback in 15 different languages. And that's something that they have the option of toggling to what language they best receive feedback in. Now, they do need to write in English, but the feedback itself can be translated into any of those. All students also have access into our writing lab, which if we have time, I'll show you. And if not, where you are on Packback, there's a little button up the top that says writing lab. But that's something that is open for students at all hours. They can use it for any sort of paper that they're working on. So it doesn't even need to be for, say, your course. But if I'm in a music course, since we were in that earlier, that asked me to write one report a year and that professor doesn't use Packback, and I think, wow, well, I'd really like some feedback before I submit it, I can use that too along the way. As we looked at, we also have the chatbot and we have the customizable supports that you can choose to utilize or not. I know we looked a tiny bit earlier at the revisions, but that's something we're also very, very excited about and use that to create a more balanced back and forth with professors and students too, allowing work to continue to be edited until it reaches whatever level the professor wants there. And on the professor side of things too, we're able to have multiple touch points through things like match and message that we looked at earlier. The mechanical grading side of things, we're really trying to take a lift off of that so that you can ideally focus on the content and ideas of your course. And then through things like our follow-up assignments, we're also able to better scaffold assignments for your course and for students. When we look at originality assignments, this is, again, we were asking about uniqueness and AI risk. So I just want to make sure that I pull up this slide too, so you can see a little bit of what that looks like on the platform, but as well as pulled out of the platform too. And then we're about at 10 minutes, which is great news because I want to make sure that, again, you have some time to click around, but also I can answer some additional questions and give you some resources in terms of that follow-up that I can do. And you can also anticipate an email that has a bunch of different resources for you along the way that will be forthcoming later this week, I would assume.
There's a question.
Great.
I don't know if you'll know this answer, but
Perfect.
do you know if students are using the writing lab for an assignment, perhaps not in your class, they download it and then they upload it to Canvas, will it be flagged as having used AI to help them compose it?
That is a great question. My initial answer is I don't think that it does that, but also that is one that I will absolutely follow up on. So I'm going to type it in my document here real quick and get you a confirmed answer, but I do not think that's an issue.
I know sometimes like Grammarly, yeah, is a big culprit there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Okay, excellent. Got that down. Any other questions that come to mind that I may not know or I may?
I think the last time I had, maybe when you all were coming, like the last time you were here, which was February 2024, I think you all were working on the multi-language feedback.
Mhm.
And it's great to see that that's now available. Is there a way for us to test that out, just as a, just to
Yeah,
see?
absolutely. So let's just jump back in here. I think I can do it from a closed community, so let me find out here. Okay, great. So if I come back here, because I just went into a draft as if I was a student, and up here at the top where it says translation, it will default to English, but there are a variety of different languages that students can choose from.
That's great to know. I had not seen that feature yet. I had heard about it, but I hadn't.
Also, this just came to mind because it happened in a meeting with a professor the other day. But something that they didn't know and I didn't think to ever identify, but we've talked about how I'm in a presenter mode, but you also have that option. And this professor was saying that that would have been really helpful for the particular thing that they were doing. But if you go to my account in this upper right corner, you can toggle on presenter mode if that's something that helps you. So I meant to start mentioning that to people and have not remembered until this moment. I'll also point out that something else that would be probably new from the last time somebody was there from Packback is we also have this content library too, where you can save information there, but you can also get ideas from other people. And again, it's very new, it's still being built out, but if you go into the content library, you're able to explore some different templates depending on what type of course that you have going on. And once you go in there, you can toggle it then, of course, to higher education too, and be able to see and to share with one another and get ideas from other people. Awesome. Well, we did some questions here already. So a couple other last things that I want to just identify before we do one last round of any questions that have come up. Our support team is fantastic, and we have somebody who is manning that email 7 days a week. And we really encourage you to let students know about that too, because we just don't need professors also then trying to deal with the tech issues, so on and so forth. So if there's ever a need that arises, this is an open email that we encourage everyone to use. And then from there, if Packback is something that you haven't utilized before, but you'd like to give it a shot, or if it's something that you have utilized before and you have questions further, then some of the next options of getting some help are either utilizing, like we said, the help email, or here's my email as well. You certainly can email me and I'll send you my calendar link. We can find a time that works for us. And then we do also have Packback office hours too, that are a great time to ask any questions, especially if it comes to things like your LMS integration, so on and so forth. But please feel free to either take a picture of this slide or jot down my email. And again, you can anticipate a follow-up too with some resources that we'll send, whether that is that you want to know more about some of the studies that Packback has done, or if you want to know some more about getting a slide deck for your first day of class. We've got a variety of things to share with you. And then for me, last but not least, is that we do really value and utilize any feedback. So if you don't mind scanning the QR code and answering a couple questions about today's session, that is so, so helpful to us, and I would appreciate it a lot. And I'll give you a minute for that. And then my parting gift to everyone is a picture with my adorable geriatric pup. His name is Taquito. So that's coming in just a minute if you don't mind filling out the survey.
Well, thank you, Christina, so much for joining us today. I know,
There he is.
oh, very sweet.
Well, I really appreciate all of you giving your time and your lunchtime too. And please, please let me know if I can help with anything else. And if you do have any other questions in our last couple minutes, I'm happy to answer them or at least write them down.
Awesome. Well, I know we'll chat and see if maybe we can get more of our faculty connected to you, or maybe figure out if there's another good session where we can continue to build on the great foundation that you've given us today and some of the new tools that you all continue to release to help with student engagement and critical.
Awesome. I would love that. Well, thank you all and have a great rest of your Monday.